Hello and welcome to NTD News Today. Kevin Hogan here. Let's take a look at our top stories. Senate Democrats passed a $3.5 trillion budget blueprint, advancing President Biden's vision for reshaping federal priorities. It comes a day after the Senate passed the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. After New York Governor Andrew Cuomo announced his resignation Tuesday, questions remain about what's next for him. He still faces potential criminal charges and civil liability for allegations of sexual harassment. President Biden says he has no regrets about pulling out of Afghanistan, this while the U.S. threatens the Taliban with isolation if they take Kabul. The Mexican president pledges to protect a journalist threatened by a drug cartel over her reporting. Mexico is one of the most dangerous places for journalists. And nationwide protests have broken out in Poland against a new broadcasting law. Critics say the country's reputation for media freedom could be at stake. Senate Democrats pushed through the $3.5 trillion budget blueprint this morning around 4 a.m. It's the latest win for President Biden. NTD's Jessica Beatty has the details.
Is agreed to.
Senate Democrats pushed through a $3.5 trillion budget framework early Wednesday morning without any Republican support. They plan to pay for it by raising taxes on the wealthy and corporations.
The Democratic budget will bring a generational transformation to how our economy works for average Americans.
The budget, dubbed Human Infrastructure, includes childcare, free community college, universal pre-K, and a pathway to citizenship for certain illegal immigrants. It's a crucial step for President Biden's Build Back Better agenda.
So we're hoping both of these bills will get to the president's desk in September so he can sign them both. We can make both of them law.
The budget passed following hours of debate on voting amendments starting Tuesday afternoon and wrapping up shortly before 4 a.m. Wednesday. Republicans denounced the $3.5 trillion budget, which has yet to be drafted. Senator Roger Marshall saying the unsustainable spending policies are irresponsible and will do nothing but crush economic recovery, unleash runaway inflation, and destroy the futures of our children and grandchildren. And Senator James Lankford calling it a reckless spending spree that will accelerate the national debt. The House plans to vote on the fiscal blueprint in about a couple weeks. The Senate turned to the budget after it approved the other big chunk of Biden's objectives, the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package. Senator Ted Cruz warns that one section of the bill would hurt the crypto industry by adding new regulations and taxes on crypto platforms.
There aren't 5 senators in this body with any real understanding of how cryptocurrency operates. And yet, this body is prepared to obliterate an industry willy-nilly.
He says it could push the U.S. crypto market overseas along with jobs. If the bill becomes law, it's unclear how it will affect crypto markets. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan signed arrest warrants for the 52 Texas House Democrats. They left the state to block Republican-led election reforms. The Texas Supreme Court has ruled that if the representatives don't show up, law enforcement could detain them and bring them back to the state capitol. The move comes after at least 24 Democrats fled to Washington. They were trying to block a Republican-led election reform bill by running out the clock on a special session. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the Democrats were trying to undermine the Constitution and avoid doing their jobs. Democrats say they will fight for an injunction in court. They said in a statement that the governor and House Speaker want to arrest political opponents and that they are defending the freedom to vote. High-level officials from the U.S. and Mexico met Tuesday to discuss cooperation between the two countries on immigration issues. The meeting comes as pressure mounts on the Biden administration to contain an escalating illegal immigration crisis.
U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas traveled to Mexico City Tuesday to meet with Mexican Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also participated. The two sides discussed immigration and border issues. Ebrard posted on Twitter that the talks were productive and went well. The Mexican Foreign Ministry released a statement about the meeting, saying the delegations agreed to expand cooperation in order to manage orderly, safe, and regular migration flows with respect for the human rights of migrants and asylum seekers. The talks come as the Biden administration faces increasing pressure to stem the border crisis. Border Patrol detentions of illegal immigrants have increased every month since President Biden took office. and polls show that Americans give Biden poor marks in dealing with the crisis. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki addressed the issue at a press briefing Tuesday. She says they recently started expelling illegal immigrants further into Mexico.
The Department of Homeland Security started transporting certain families expelled under Title 42 by plane to the interior of Mexico. This is in order to attempt to cut down on recidivism and further spread of the Delta variant. U.S.
officials say 260 migrants were deported on Monday. Honduran Gerson Flores is one of the deported immigrants. He says he thought he would be allowed to stay in the U.S.
This is really sad. We weren't asked for any explanation. The Americans said nothing. We wanted President Biden to grant us a legal opportunity to stay in the United States, no matter how we get in, if they put us in shackles.
Psaki says the administration is ramping up efforts to expedite expulsions. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Now that New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has announced that he's leaving office in 2 weeks, questions turn to what comes next for the governor. He still faces potential criminal charges and lawsuits over allegations of sexual harassment. And some New York lawmakers still want to hold him accountable for excessive nursing home deaths from the pandemic. NTD's Don Ma has the story.
Now that Governor Andrew Cuomo announced his resignation, what comes next for the New York Democrat? Cuomo said he'll work on making a seamless transition to Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul over the next 2 weeks. She'll assume the governorship after he steps down. Prosecutors from multiple areas of New York say they are investigating criminal charges against Cuomo over sexual misconduct. Cuomo has repeatedly denied the allegations against him. He could decide to pardon himself, but Fox News contributor Andrew McCarthy says he doesn't think Cuomo will do that because the self-pardon would seem like an admission of guilt, and the allegations against him only amount to a misdemeanor. At least one of Cuomo's alleged victims, Lindsay Boylan, says she'll file a civil suit. Other women are likely to join her. The Justice Department dropped an investigation over excessive deaths that took place in New York nursing homes during the pandemic and accusations of a deliberate cover-up. Democrat New York Assemblyman Ron Kim tells Fox News that he's not ready to let Cuomo off the hook.
But I have committed back in March that after he goes down for sexual assault and harassment, I will still be here to hold him accountable for the thousands of nursing home deaths that happened under his watch, and I plan on still doing that.
It's unclear if New York's legislature will seek to impeach Cuomo. Lawmakers said the process would take weeks, so it's not likely to happen before Cuomo leaves office. If he's not impeached, the 63-year-old Cuomo could run for office again in the future. Don Ma, NTD News.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has resigned in the wake of a report released last week. It found he sexually harassed at least 11 women. Residents in the nation's largest city commented on the decision. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Residents of New York City reacted Tuesday after the news of Andrew Cuomo's resignation as state governor.
I'm just super surprised, overwhelmed with the actual decision that he made. I feel like he could have maybe tried to fight it, but I guess he gracefully bowed out, and it just shows lack of transparency.
Governor Cuomo announced he was stepping down Tuesday over a barrage of sexual harassment allegations.
It was a good decision for him because it's a lot of people. I know it's the way it is because when you see the video, he hugs and kisses everybody. But the position that he has right now, you have to be very careful because the harassment is all over on the job.
The 63-year-old Democrat denied intentionally mistreating women, but noted that he should step down so that the government could get back to governing.
Well, a little bit, because I thought even with the sexual harassment, I thought he would still keep going. So I'm happy that at least he resigned.
The third-term governor's resignation will take effect in 2 weeks. Prior to his announcement, momentum had built in the legislature to impeach him.
Congressman Ron Kind says he's retiring at the end of his term. Kind represents Wisconsin in the House of Representatives. He told reporters he's running out of gas. He says he's part of a dying breed of politician who has tried to find common ground and work in a bipartisan way. Political trackers rate Kind as among the most moderate members of Congress. Kind has represented Wisconsin's 3rd Congressional District since 1997. He's one of only a few Democrats who represent districts that voted for President Trump's re-election in 2020. His district is a key target for Republicans as they seek to flip the House in the upcoming midterm elections. Kind is the 6th House member to announce he will retire at the end of his current term. The Taliban continue to capture territory in Afghanistan, yet President Biden says he has no regrets about withdrawing U.S. troops from the country. Here he is.
They've got to fight for themselves, fight for their nation.
Biden said the U.S. will continue to provide air support and pay Afghan fighters' salaries. He says the Afghans have outnumbered the Taliban, and he says there's still a possibility the Afghans will be successful because their new so-called warlord is a serious fighter.
I think they're beginning to realize they've got to come together politically at the top, but we're going to continue to keep our commitment. But I do not regret my decision.
The White House said the goal in Afghanistan to disrupt terrorist activity has been achieved, thus the withdrawal. And the administration said a Taliban takeover is preventable and that Afghans need to have the will to push back.
It is important to us, and it is a fundamental value to continue to be partners and support their effort, but ultimately is up to the Afghans to determine what their future looks like.
What's more, the U.S. Special Envoy for Afghanistan urged the Taliban to end its violence. He warned the insurgents the international community will not recognize them after they come to power by force. And the State Department is evaluating the threat to the U.S. Embassy in Kabul on a daily basis. A spokesman said the Taliban is not living up to the 2020 peace agreement and said the U.S. stance hasn't changed since April.
Certainly the levels of violence do not appear consistent with what the Taliban pledged in that agreement. Of course, we do want to minimize the number of employees in Afghanistan whose functions can be performed elsewhere.
Meanwhile, Russia is holding joint military exercises in Tajikistan near the Afghanistan border. They involve 1,800 Russian soldiers and over 400 units of military hardware. Moscow fears the Taliban offensive in the wake of the U.S. withdrawal could destabilize its southern border region and that this could cause refugees to flee to Central Asian countries near Russia. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador vowed to protect a prominent journalist after a powerful drug cartel threatened to kill her. It's the latest instance of serious violence facing reporters in the country.
A well-known Mexican journalist was offered protection by the country's president on Tuesday. A powerful drug cartel threatened to kill TV anchor Azucena Uresti, issuing a direct threat in a video message. It's the latest instance of the serious violence journalists face in Mexico. Uresti received a video delivered in the name of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, a criminal group waging battles for territory in the southern state of Michoacan. The footage showed a man wearing a mask surrounded by gunmen, accusing Uresti of showing bias in coverage toward their rivals, the so-called self-defense groups that can act as vigilantes against the cartels. In a bold gesture, on Tuesday, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador expressed solidarity with Uresti.
I completely reject these threats. We don't accept this sort of behavior. We're going to protect Azucena Uresti, and we're going to protect all Mexicans. It's our responsibility.
The president has previously criticized media he views as hostile to his administration. Uresti has rejected the cartel's accusations and on Twitter thanked López Obrador. She vowed to keep reporting and offered her solidarity with other journalists.
I repeat, our work will continue to be based on the truth and with the intention of providing information on the reality of a country like ours. And also, as has happened on other occasions, I express my solidarity and support to hundreds of colleagues who are still threatened or who have had to leave their areas.
Mexico is one of the most dangerous countries for journalists, with around 140 murdered since 2010.
Hackers have just scored what could be the biggest theft in the cryptocurrency industry. The decentralized finance platform Poly Network says $600 million was stolen from them. The company links the blockchains of multiple virtual currencies to help them work together. Poly Network says a vulnerability in its system allowed hackers to make off with the funds. The company begged the thieves to return the money, and it appears they're listening. By Wednesday morning, Poly Network says nearly $5 million was returned. It's not clear who is behind the attack or why they returned the money. Coming up, a student workshop on religious exemptions for vaccines. The organizer tells us how she was denied her state-protected religious right, but turned things around. All that and more in just a minute. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has added 7 more destinations to its high-risk travel list. The so-called Level 4 countries are where there have been more than 500 COVID-19 cases per 100,000 residents in the past 28 days. They're considered very high risk. The newest additions to that list include Iceland, France, Israel, Thailand, Aruba, French Polynesia, and Eswatini. Those nations joined 16 other new additions from last week, including Greece, Ireland, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The CDC advises against all international travel, even for vaccinated people. It also recommends anyone who must travel to get fully vaccinated beforehand. The Pentagon released rules on religious exemptions for the upcoming vaccine mandate in the military. Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby says the military takes religious freedom seriously, and that's one of the things they signed up to defend. He says members seeking a religious exemption will get required counseling from a medical professional over the risks of not being vaccinated, and they will be counseled about how their decision could impact their travel, deployability, and military assignments. Kirby says any members who are hesitant to take a vaccine will be counseled on its safety and effectiveness. Health-related exemptions will be determined by medical staff. All U.S. service members without an exemption are required to take a vaccine by September 15th. A college graduate from Indiana is teaching students how to apply for religious exemptions. She says this is to ensure others don't experience the same discrimination and segregation she dealt with. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Some colleges and universities are putting up a fight. In states like Louisiana, Missouri, and Indiana, the law says students have the right to turn down vaccines on religious grounds. But this religious right has been denied for students like Kate Corrigan.
Religious exemptions are being denied left and right within our country.
Corrigan graduated from Earlham School of Religion in Indiana this year. She says the college told her she needed to show proof of COVID vaccination to attend her graduation. Corrigan says she's had a long-standing religious exemption for vaccines, but they turned it down anyway, initially.
It was accepted for all of the summer camps I've been to high school, then to the 4 years of my bachelor's degree, and then even to my master's program. And then all of a sudden, I received an email from the administration saying that they were requiring the COVID-19 vaccine to show proof of that, as well as proof of a negative COVID test to attend graduation. So I reminded them I have a long-standing religious exemption to vaccines, and they basically told me they weren't accepting it that round. So then they actually changed their policy after I reminded them of my long-standing religious exemption and my rights under Indiana state law. But I faced a lot of backlash. I was harassed, threatened. My professor, my academic advisor, threatened to have me removed from graduation. He then threatened to contact Boston University, which is a university I'll be attending this fall, and retract his letter of recommendation. I was removed from speaking at graduation. I then requested security because I continued to be harassed and threatened, and the president of my institution replied in an email, LOL.
We contacted several staff members at Earlham School of Religion, but we haven't heard back. Corrigan says she reached out to her district senator, the Indiana Attorney General, and filed complaints to 2 state agencies before the college walked back its vaccine mandate. Now she's holding religious exemption workshops to equip students with the knowledge and tools they need to opt out.
And what would you say to students who want to apply for a religious exemption but aren't confident enough or maybe just don't know how?
Definitely. I recommend you can check out my website, studentsagainstmandates.com. I have some information there on how to file a religious exemption. There's some resources where you can look up different scriptures. And in addition to that, you can sign up for one of my workshops. I will do my best to help you and offer some guidance and support in helping you form and craft your own religious exemption letter.
Corrigan started her workshops over a week ago. She says about 50 people have already gotten back to her saying their exemptions were approved. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Legal action is underway against the 2 trucking companies involved in a deadly multi-vehicle crash in Alabama this past June. The fiery crash sadly killed 9 children and 1 adult. A federal lawsuit has been filed on behalf of a van driver from the Tallapoosa County Girls Ranch and the parents of the children who died in the van. The van driver survived. 2 trucking companies are both named as defendants in the suit, as is a driver. The lawsuit accuses the companies of negligence and wantonness. According to the filing, there was a failure to comply with speed limits and road rules. One trucking company said that there were many factors in the crash and that they believe their driver was traveling at or below the speed limit. Attempts to reach the other company and the driver for comment were unsuccessful. Federal authorities are still investigating the crash to determine the cause.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
Peace comes from within. I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. The human body is the temple of God, and religion is the experience of God within yourself. Are you ready to discover the truth within yourself? Book an appointment now at divinelight.com.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
A special report on what's taking place inside California's female prisons. In September 2020, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Senate Bill 132 into law, requiring prisons to house inmates based on their chosen gender identity. Now, biological men are sharing prison cells with terrified women, and one woman is reportedly pregnant. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
In California, biological male criminals are allowed to be housed in female prisons if they identify as women. Women's Liberation Front, or WOLF, a feminist organization which is in direct contact with inmates and staff, tells NTD that at least one woman in Central California women's facility is pregnant as a result of the male inmates. Because pregnancy is private health data, the reports cannot be verified with the prison.
Some of the men have been rounded up and put in segregation on the yard where the woman who is supposedly pregnant. So they've taken 3 of them and put them in administrative segregation.
Lauren Adams is Wolf's legal counsel. She says several weeks ago, the prison began giving out condoms and providing information about inmates' options if they get pregnant. At the time, Wolf called the new resources a tactic admission by officials that women should expect to be raped when housed in prison with men, where all sex is considered non-consensual by default within the system. Adams says she thinks many people picture someone like Laverne Cox from Orange is the New Black when they think of transgender prisoners, but she says this is far from the truth. Many of the ones now housed in female prisons still look like men, and some, she said, are reportedly not taking their hormones, and one has grown a beard. And worse yet, Adams says some of the men that have been transferred into women's prisons are sex offenders.
One of the men who is in the yard where the pregnant woman is and who has been put in segregation is a sex offender. He has been convicted of multiple forcible rapes, but that's not what he's serving time for this time.
She says another male inmate housed in the California Institution for Women is serving time for molesting 2 children. As of April, around 250 biological male prisoners filed requests to transfer to women's prisons. So far, only about 20 transfers have been processed. None have been denied. Numerous women have written to Wolf saying they're terrified.
Having to use the toilet in front of men, having to shower in front of men. It's demoralizing and humiliating. We have religious women in there who, as part of their practice of their religion, rely on sex separation. And so on a daily 24-hour basis, they're being, that right's being infringed upon. It's really unreal.
She says the female inmates never got a say in the law, and even now, their calls for help go unheard. Adams says they feel forgotten.
They just feel like nobody cares about us, nobody cares about our safety, nobody cares about our feelings. 86% of incarcerated women have histories of sexual or physical abuse. Many have PTSD. The mental health options in there are very limited, and I don't know how you treat anxiety that's associated with literally being locked up with a sex offender. It's not like you can medicate that away or counsel it away.
In a July phone call to Wolf, one female inmate said prison guards told inmates they won't segregate the men from the women's cells because they're worried about getting sued.
And how do you think that we feel? We do not feel safe knowing you're scared of a lawsuit. We do not feel safe that you're going to put them in our room because you're afraid they'll claim discrimination, when all along the discrimination has been against us.
Adams said the situation cannot be blamed on the prisons, since the policy was made law by California politicians. She said some of the legislators were trying to protect transgender individuals.
But, the solution to men being victimized in men's prisons is not to change who the victims are. It's not to, instead of having male victims, now we have female victims.
Fundamentally, she says, women deserve to be housed in single-sex prisons.
We're not clownfish, we're not frogs. We are born how we're born, and that doesn't change no matter how much we see ourselves in a certain way. So I think that we need to remember that we're not housing identities, we're housing people.
She says for the most part, there's been silence over what's now taking place in the prisons. Likely, she says, because many people are afraid of taking a position and being called transphobic. Adams says the time has come for people to be brave and speak up. To read the letters from incarcerated women or sign the petition to halt the transfer of men into women's prisons, you can go to Women's Liberation Front's website. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
It looks like a space race to get back to the moon won't be happening as soon as we thought. NASA revealed on Tuesday that returning astronauts to the moon by 2024 is not likely to happen because of spacesuit development delays. NASA's Inspector General says they won't be ready until April 2025 at the earliest. NASA has spent more than $1 billion on the new spacesuits for the Artemis program. It blames the delays on funding issues, COVID-19, and technical changes. There are 27 different companies supplying components for the suits. SpaceX's Elon Musk responded to the report, saying SpaceX could do it if need be. In April, SpaceX won the nearly $3 billion contract to develop the lunar lander for the program. Northrop Grumman is making another supply run to the International Space Station. The speedy special delivery includes pizza among the fresh produce and scientific equipment. The company's Cygnus cargo ship rocketed away from Virginia's eastern shore Tuesday. It should reach the International Space Station on Thursday. The 8,200-pound shipment includes fresh apples, tomatoes, and kiwi, along with a pizza kit and a cheese smorgasbord for the 7 astronauts. Also flying to the space station is a mounting bracket for solar wings, a material simulating moon and dirt and dust, and a slime mold, and an infrared detecting device. It's Northrop Grumman's 16th supply run for NASA and its biggest load yet. The space station is currently home to 3 Americans, 2 Russians, 1 French, and 1 Japanese. Up next, the Chinese regime sentences a Canadian businessman to 11 years for spying. The Canadian Prime Minister says the sentencing is unacceptable and unjust. China has its first case of human anthrax infection in 10 years. It has flu-like symptoms, but with a fatality rate of 80%. Stay tuned to find out more. Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, said a Chinese court's sentencing of Canadian businessman Michael Spavor was unacceptable. Spavor was sentenced to 11 years in prison for espionage. Trudeau is calling for his immediate release.
A Chinese court convicted Canadian businessman Michael Spavor of espionage on Wednesday and sentenced him to 11 years in prison. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called the sentencing absolutely unacceptable and unjust, adding that the trial did not satisfy even the minimum standards required by international law. In a video addressed to diplomats and journalists in Beijing, Canada's ambassador to China, Dominic Barton, called for Spavor's immediate release.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this decision rendered after a legal process that lacked both fairness and transparency. Our thoughts are with Michael and his family during this difficult time.
Those comments were backed up by the US Embassy in Beijing, which accused China of attempting to use human beings as bargaining leverage. The case is widely seen in Ottawa and Washington as linked to that of Huawei's chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou. Spavor's sentencing came as lawyers in Canada representing the Chinese executive make a final push to convince a court there not to extradite her. Meng faces charges of misleading HSBC about Huawei's business dealings with Iran. Trudeau is also calling for the release of another Canadian, Michael Kovrig, who was awaiting a verdict in an espionage case. Like Spavor, he was detained just days after Meng was arrested at Vancouver International Airport on a warrant from the United States. Some observers have said convictions of the two Canadians could ultimately facilitate an agreement in which they are released and sent back to Canada. Spavor's family released a statement on Wednesday saying, quote, "While we disagree with the charges, we realise that this is the next step in the process to bring Michael home, and we will continue to support him through this challenging time."
An official for Canada's Attorney General told the court in charge of the Huawei executives case that there was no cause to stop the case. He added no person has enjoyed a fairer hearing than Meng. And Australia is showing its support for Canada in a tweet, saying Australia stands with Canada in response to the arbitrary detention of Michael Spavor and the upholding of the death penalty for Robert Schellenberg in China. They're calling for due process and transparency and said they oppose the death penalty in all circumstances. Beijing is reporting a case of another deadly infectious disease. This one has a fatality rate of over 80%, and it's China's first human infection in 10 years. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on the story.
Chinese citizens are getting nervous after a Monday report from health officials, but not because of the Delta variant. 4 days ago, a patient from an autonomous county in China was rushed to a hospital in Beijing. Doctors discovered the patient had contracted a deadly infectious disease called pulmonary anthrax. It's China's first case of human anthrax infection in 10 years. Anthrax is usually found in cattle and sheep. Human infection can happen after contact with sick animals or contaminated products. The most dangerous form of the infection is pulmonary anthrax, caused by inhaling droplets or dust containing the bacterium. It has a fatality rate of over 80%. Those infected develop flu-like symptoms, like a sore throat, mild fever, and fatigue. That worsens into shortness of breath and even death. According to the report from Chinese health officials, the patient has a history of contact with local cattle and sheep and came to Beijing for medical treatment 4 days after symptoms developed. The patient is currently under isolated treatment at the hospital. Anthrax can be transmitted directly between people, but isn't as infectious as the flu or COVID-19. Authorities have implemented measures to control the spread of the disease. The last patient diagnosed with pulmonary anthrax in China died in 2011. China's quarantine facilities and strict lockdowns are shown to be poorly organized, and people are treated badly. In China, when one person tests positive for the CCP virus, it's common practice for hundreds of people who had been in contact with them to be taken from their homes and quarantined in facilities, such as hotels or school dorms. A video surfaced on Tuesday showing a woman's voice message in a group message chat. She says she doesn't have anything to eat at all. She adds that even in jail, prisoners should have meals. It turns out the woman has been quarantined in a hotel in Chengde city of central China's Hunan province. We interviewed a Mr. Han who has been under quarantine in the same hotel as this woman. He told us over the weekend about 500 people were brought there for quarantine. He said there was not enough food. Many people couldn't get anything. The woman in the video was one of them.
There are too many people. We distributed the food from the top to the bottom in the building. The woman seems to be on the 6th floor. Food was running out upstairs. She shouted that she had no food to eat and she's hungry, and people are not allowed to go out shopping.
At the time, the temperature was over 90 degrees or 30 degrees Celsius. Mr. Han said they didn't get any water when they first came.
I told some responsible person at the CDC. They gave us a bottle of water in the morning. The air conditioner was turned off, and it was getting hotter and hotter. I again went to the staff. They gave us another bottle of water in the evening.
He later told us the situation was improving. Another video from Monday shows an unknown quarantine site in horrible condition. The quarantine cells are like narrow cages. Seniors over 80 years old have to sit on a stool, and a young mother holding a 2-year-old baby sits on the floor. They have been like this for over 10 hours overnight.
晚上7点多钟到这里来，一直就在待在这里。80岁的老人，你现在坐在这里，现在已经凌晨了，凌晨5点钟。你看，抱着小孩，2岁的小孩，做的这种事情，你看看。
A commentator tries to explain why. Relying on administrative means to solve medical problems that will inevitably lead to humanitarian disasters. Another comment shows sympathy. In the eyes of the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese people are inferior to pigs and dogs. The sight of the old man, this woman and her child makes me sad. And in Hubei province, the authorities declared a district in Jingmen city mid-risk after confirming a case of the CCP virus there. Residents and visitors were suddenly forbidden to leave. Mr. Yu works in construction. His team of 9 employees were stuck in lockdown during their business trip there. Mr. Yu tells the Epoch Times the quarantine site is a middle school dorm, and there are no quilts. There's no hot water, no AC, and there's a severe lack of daily necessities and disinfection supplies. He said the authorities haven't told them when their quarantine will end.
Some Chinese citizens have noticed an unusual change. Their health codes, used for contact tracing and vaccination records, have suddenly gone from showing clean bills of health to possible infections. That's despite the fact that many of them tested negative for the virus during a new round of mass testing.
Reports from southern China say a health tracking app is going wild. That's according to users from China's Hunan province. The app displays a color-coded e-passport known as the user's health code. Green code holders are considered healthy. Yellow means the holder came in direct or indirect contact with a confirmed COVID-19 patient. It also means restricted mobility for the user, and that testing or isolation from medical observations may be needed. Red is even worse, indicating that the holder should be sent to hospital for further checks. In cities that have adopted the contract tracing system, only those with green codes can use public transportation and enter shops and stores. But according to Chinese media Sohu, something strange happened to one Hunan resident last week. Ms. Chen's health code was green when she came back from a neighboring grocery store, but showed red just minutes later, seemingly without cause. She noticed the change when she went to her community's entrance to meet her husband. Another resident from Hunan province told the Epoch Times that many in the area found similar issues. He asked not to reveal his voice in order to protect his identity. Instead, we used the voice actor to recreate his statement.
Many people find it bizarre. They stayed at home for days and went nowhere. But their health code suddenly turned yellow or red. This really harms them. They're also afraid, and it caused a lot of discontent among local people.
According to local regulations, once a person's code turns yellow, they must get tested for the virus twice in the span of 3 days and quarantine for 14 days. They're also blocked from going to work until the code turns green again.
A yellow code means your mobility is limited, and a red code means they'll drag you to the hospital. I saw in group chat that some people collapsed when their code turned red. They immediately fell on the group and burst into tears. It was impossible for them to control their emotions.
The unusual reports didn't stop there. Virus testing later proved many of those whose codes had changed had not been sickened.
But later, after some tests, it was found that many aren't infected with the virus, so authorities' management of the pandemic is in chaos. This has aroused strong voices of discontent.
For now, residents in the province are gathering in large crowds and taking round-the-clock virus tests.
Still to come, Germany arrests a British man on suspicion of spying. The case is the result of a joint investigation by British and German authorities.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me.
That was perfect.
But I heard every word.
A British man is suspected of passing documents to Russia's intelligence service in exchange for cash. Prosecutors say he worked at the British Embassy in Berlin until his arrest.
Identified only as David S., German prosecutors said that his apartment and workplace had been searched and he would be brought before an investigating judge later on Wednesday. British police said the man was 57. In a statement, Germany's Chief Federal Prosecutor's Office said, quote, on at least one occasion he passed on documents he had obtained in the course of his professional activities to a representative of a Russian intelligence service. Both Russia's Federal Security Service and Foreign Intelligence Service did not immediately reply to requests for comment. The man was arrested on Tuesday in Potsdam, just outside Berlin. He was employed as a local staff member at the embassy until his arrest, which was the result of a joint investigation by German and British authorities, the prosecutors said. British police said in a statement that the man was arrested on suspicion of committing offences related to being engaged in intelligence agent activity.
Russia's capital city, Moscow, may have a miniature competitor, a bustling metropolis made entirely out of Lego. The largest Lego city in the country, it's now on display in a Lego museum.
A miniature train clanks by on railroad tracks, bringing this bustling Lego metropolis to life. Situated in an old town on the outskirts of Moscow, the newly built miniature city stretches around 600 square feet in size. On display at a local Lego museum, its founders claim it's the biggest Lego city in Russia.
Each house is a masterpiece of architecture, not only outside but also inside. Inside there are toilets, a bathtub, a shower, cribs, a ping pong table, a billiard table. There are even attributes of our life such as, for example, a real Lego chandelier.
The Lego City features a number of imposing buildings, including a Gothic cathedral made up of 22,000 parts. Some of them were designed and created from scratch by enthusiasts. Timmer says he's especially proud of the gift sets that were originally given to their own employees by Lego. The sets are considered rare finds, but Timmer hopes to get a full collection of them. The oldest exhibits are boxes from the 1960s and 70s.
We have a main rule in the museum that we only buy new sets, sealed, to preserve their amazing brilliance and complete newness, so to say. We open these seals ourselves, as it is very important for us.
The collection includes over 800 sets, including replicas of the Taj Mahal and Rome's Colosseum. Timmer calls Lego the love of his life. He now shares high passion and meticulousness for the hobby with his wife, who became a fan of Lego after they met.
My husband really showed me that Lego can be interesting, not only for children, but also for adults. I became interested in studying the history of the company, in assembling. I love it now. At some point, it was my kind of meditation.
Lego, the Danish toy maker, celebrates its 90th birthday in 2020. Last year, Lego reported a sales increase of over 20%. While many retailers were struggling amid the pandemic.
Rafael Nadal withdraws from the Masters 1000 in Toronto due to persistent pain in his injured left foot. The number 4 ranked tennis champ is looking forward to making a comeback a little later. The injury kept the 20-time Grand Slam champion out of Wimbledon and the Tokyo Olympics this year. It also played a role in his shocking third-round exit at the Washington Open last week. Nadal said the decision was a tough one, but he added that the most important thing was getting better so he can go back to appreciating his time on the court. Nadal said he has dealt with a recurring foot issue since 2005. It returned at this year's French Open. He says he will now turn his attention to getting fit ahead of the U.S. Open in New York. Wednesday, August 11th, is National Sons and Daughters Day. You can mark the day by hanging out with your kids if you're a parent, go for a walk, or maybe head to a local park for some time offline. If your kids are grown and have flown the nest, give them a call and tell them why they're special to you. If you aren't a parent, you're still a son or daughter. Maybe you can call mom and dad or take them out for dinner if you can. Thanks for watching. At NTD, we're honored to be your source for the news. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.